Hi, I'm Rebecca Gibson and welcome back to Golden Goddess TV. So I have one of my gorgeous friends on today, the beautiful Heidi Alexandra Joy. Joy. She'll talk about joy. And Heidi's here to talk about her dark periods and her shadow times and how she's now using that as part of her business and her daily life and the choices that she's now making in terms of how she's living her life to help empower and heal the divine feminine. So Heidi, thank you for doing this. I'm so grateful that you're taking time out of your day to help me spread this love out to the rest of the world. How are you? How are you? You
Great.
good?
Thank you,
Yeah?
Beck. It's great to connect and chat to you.
I love our conversations. So can you tell everybody what it is that you do? Other than eat, sleep.
Ooh, how do you pin that, right? The elevator statement when you do lots of things.
No, what's your business?
Really, I see my job on the planet is to wake people up to really stepping into being a unique person and allowing themselves to be totally authentic, whether that's in business, whether that's leading a company, whether that's leading a family, or, you know, starting a new project. So I'm all about how can you come home to yourself and be free to be yourself.
So you've got a couple of businesses that are all kind of doing the same thing. So can you just let us know what the two, is it 2 businesses or 3 businesses that you've got? You're busy. Tell us about all of them.
So I do have a few. So number 1 is UQ Power. So that's the letter U, letter Q Power, and that stands for your uniqueness quotient. And really in that we help leaders become more conscious leaders. We really see that there's a lot of suffering today in corporate world and in business where people feel trapped. They feel like they're not able to be their full self, or they're in a grind. And so UQ really helps leaders create workplaces that are safe, that are loving, and that enable their employees to be their best self. So ideally, you shouldn't need a holiday from your work. You know, if you feel fulfilled and loving it, you should choose to have a break when you do, but you shouldn't need to run away from it. So that's UQ. We also have Leading Ladies. So Leading Ladies International is a program for women who want to step into their unique power as a brand. So it's time for women to start being a brand. You know, in the past, it's often been men. And for women who want to have a lifestyle business that's not necessarily a shop front with 10 staff and all of the normal trappings of a traditional business, it's more around women going, I want to be a speaker, author, coach, healer, whatever that might be. And how do I actually build a business where it's, dollars up, days down, income up for less days, so I have freedom and flexibility so that I can express myself and share my gifts. So that's all about that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have another business, which is a property investing business, and that helps low to mid socioeconomic people find really good affordable housing. And so we rent to people who are in need. And specifically, we also help house people that have come from refuges or domestic violence and situations like that so that they can feel safe and create a safe environment at home. And excitingly, we're working on a new project through that at the moment called the Joy Box, which I'm sure we can talk about later if you want to, but it has to do with tiny houses.
I do. I think that's so exciting. You also are a philanthropist and you're on the board of one of our good friends' charity, and you're also doing some other work with Being More Human. So can you tell us about your philanthropy work?
Sure. So I'm a co-founder of Human Power, which with my colleague Michelle Crawford, we started when we saw the UN's Global Development Goals and saw the need to, I guess, bring more cohesion to the world and to bring safety, peace and harmony, not just in companies and the home, but in the world as well. And we started going, a lot of people think of the Global Development Goals as being a third world thing. Or not in Australia. And we went, actually, there are homeless people here. We have a lot of socio problems here. Let's start doing something here in Australia. So we run an event or two every year around one of the global development goals. And our primary aim is to bring corporates together with not-for-profits, together with politicians and the community to say, let's look for joint solutions to some of our problems. So that's human power, and it's all about harnessing the power of humans. And then I'm on the board, and I'm one of the founding board members, and very proud to be, of Melissa Histon's, our founder of the charity Got Your Back Sister. And that specifically helps women and children begin again after they've left domestic violence. And so we help with household items and helping women set up a new home when they leave a refuge. And we also do things like run mentoring programs and help them with budgeting and self-development, and also self-defense classes. So just lots of support services to help women and children begin again.
And I really urge people to go and check out both Being Human Power and Got Your Back Sister, both on Instagram, Instagram and Facebook. Go and check them out, because they're really worthy causes, especially Got Your Back Sister, because domestic violence is such a problem globally. And it's something that we really need to address, especially here in Australia. It's like averaging one woman a week dying at the hand of her partner or ex-partner. It's just not acceptable. And it's something that we really need to heal. And I love how you're one of these people that actually walk your talk. The stuff that you're doing for your business and the charity stuff, you're actually living your life the way that you're helping other leaders and corporate, etc., how to do that. And I think that's really important, because there's so much inauthentic crap out there now online and social media, and the white noise of bullshit can become really overwhelming, really. So I really admire you. So where in your life do you think kind of led you to now doing all of this? What do you think the drive was to help you heal your stuff, so now you're helping other people heal theirs?
So, gosh, it's a tangled web. I won't bore you, let's say, with the whole story, but there's been a whole range of things, like anyone in their life experience. I had some trauma as a child. I had some super toxic narcissistic relationships. I worked for narcissistic leaders and bosses. I worked in some incredible nurturing workplaces where I got to see life, death, and everything in the middle. And then I also worked in some incredibly toxic workplaces that quite literally were killing their staff, as in people were having major health problems, their own relationship breakdowns and things like that as a result of a really toxic workplace. And I guess at the crux of all of that, as well as my property investing and seeing families begging for a property because they've been sleeping in their car or living in a motel, I just saw suffering and couldn't see why in this amazing, beautiful country that we live in, Australia, this still existed, and to the extent that it did. And so I guess I've always felt driven to try and do something about that and make a change. And I guess I was like, what are my small steps and pieces I can do with my two hands, and can I collaborate and work with other people? So I've always been someone about servant leadership. In order to be a good leader, you've got to serve first.
Yeah, exactly.
And that probably created some of my darkness, in that I took it to the extreme where I would serve first and forget to take care of myself, where I gave away some of my power to the extent that I actually started to feel quite trapped. So trapped in relationships, trapped in my workplace, trapped in a certain way of conforming to society. And I'm quite a creative person, and I'm an expander that likes to expand and grow and learn. And so I started to get really, really frustrated and actually started to get ill. So I had adrenal fatigue and had no female hormones and was totally in my masculine. Everything was from the head up. Yeah. Drive, do, buy another house, rent it to someone else, get a career change, get a promotion. And so I started looking around and going, I've got all this stuff, but I just don't have fulfillment and satisfaction. And I feel like I'm running someone else's race and I have no idea where we're going.
Yeah.
So, you know, part of my service and wish to be of service actually also was to my own detriment, because I didn't get clear first on, you know, what am I here for myself. So, yeah, it kind of was a bit of a fed on itself for a while.
I find that there's so much talk online with coaches, etc. Because what's your why? What's your why? And people are forgetting what's your purpose, because the two of them are actually completely different things. Your why is very ego-based. Why are you doing a job that you're doing? Why do you want to earn that sort of money? What is it that you want to call into your life that's going to help you feel happy or fulfilled? But the purpose is far greater than that. And I find that a lot of my clients come to me is because they've reached that 5-year, 10-year, 20-year goal mark and still like, why am I'm not happy? Like, I've got everything that I manifested and everything that I wanted, but still there's something missing. And it's because we're not teaching enough about purpose. We're not teaching enough that you're a spiritual being having this human experience, and your purpose is far greater than the human stuff that you're accumulating or doing, or whether or not, you know, you've written a book or you've done this or done that. And that's why I've created this Golden Goddess TV, is for people to understand that so many of us right now have a collective purpose of healing and empowering the divine feminine. And so for women like yourself and what I used to be, totally in my masculine, feeling that that was the wonderful thing to be, because, you know, you didn't want to be some soft, airy-fairy, unempowered or disempowered female. So I was living in my masculine and sick, like literally dying, because I was surrounding myself with so much toxicity in the pursuit of protecting and providing for myself, which is the masculine energy, right? Completely forgot about the feminine side of nurturing and creating, and I actually had felt that that was a waste of my time to create, was not a productive thing to do, because I had talked myself into it not being income producing activity. And what I really want people to understand now, with the changes in the way we're seeing things with leadership, the changes in the way businesses are being run, the changes what's happening with big companies and stuff, is people really getting heartfelt now, wanting connections with their clients and deeper connections with people that they're working with, and learning about their families, and not having everyone sitting around in grey cubicles, like you start at 9, you leave at 5, you don't get 5 minutes to go to the toilet, you know, all that sort of ridiculousness. So it's ridiculous, isn't it?
I couldn't agree more. And I think most of the companies we work with now, we're looking at, you know, balancing what I call the quadruple bottom line. So people, planet, purpose, and profit. So instead of just going for profit, it's all about, well, what's the purpose of that? What's the purpose of your people? You know, are we taking care of the planet? You know, and actually starting to balance all of those things. And I know that for me, I strove really hard in my early years, and I was really fortunate in some ways to have achieved financial freedom, which independence was a very strong driver of mine. And I'd made enough money and also created enough wealth through assets that I could quit my job and basically had replaced my income with the income that I got from my assets. So at about age 32, I was what you would technically call a millionaire, and was really proud of the fact that I'd built that on my own, and yet had almost killed my body in the meantime. But if you'd asked me if I was okay, I would have said I was great. Yeah. And I'd neglected the spiritual conscious side, and that was starved and drying up.
Yeah.
And I wasn't even conscious that that was happening. And I think in a way, happiness had become meeting a list. Yeah. And I was a great list taker and a great list checker offer, you know, and I'd write my list even though I'd already done stuff, just so that I could tick it off, you know. Yeah. It gave me a great sense of satisfaction. And so I realized after a while that the list was not even my list. It was a list that I'd been conditioned to write. Mm-hmm. And so in my mid-30s, I started to erase the list and go, let's start from scratch. You know, the purpose of my life up until then had been to fit in, and to survive and to prove myself in this world that I really wasn't suited for. So my programming was so strong that my comfort level came from being busy and being in my masculine and being corporate. And it wasn't until I was prepared to lose it all and step away from that that I really started to uncover my own uniqueness and who I am, which is why I'm so passionate about uniqueness, because I really think people should be able to explore their inner and outer worlds freely. Yeah.
Absolutely. And you've touched on so many points I want to bring up. I want to talk about your spiritual journey, because I know for people who don't know you well, they would not think that you're a spiritually minded person, because you're not like walking around in crushed purple velvet, or you know what I mean? You know how you don't have these outward appearance, or even the way that you communicate. Even the way you communicate with people, you wouldn't expect about how spiritual you really are. I also want to touch on the fact that you're a self-made millionaire and how you're deciding to now live your life now in the future, which is very different from most people who are earning 7 figures. And I want to talk about the fact that we're conditioned as women, especially in our age, because growing up in the 70s and 80s, the feminism had really started to kick in, and women were really pushing for being more than teachers or nurses, although I ended up becoming a nurse. Well, they wanted to be a lawyer, but it had been drummed into me. Study, 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 study. You have to be one of the boys. You have to beat the boys at their own game. You have to, you know, stand out. You have to be louder, but don't be too loud. Don't be too much. Don't be too emotional. Take away all that feminine part of yourself and go and squish it somewhere, because it's not acceptable if you're going to make it in a man's world. So here I am going to throw myself in male maximum security prisons. You couldn't get more masculine in the environment that I was working in, and I ruled the roost, but it was at the expense. Oh, I did. Work. Like the mother hen's like running to the rooster nest. But it was at the expense of my health, because I had shut down my spiritual health, because to me, growing up then, your spiritual health was woo-woo bullshit, and it wasn't important, and it wasn't something that you were to focus on. You were to focus on getting another degree. Like, you know, I spent half my life at university. So let's just talk on that first, because that leads into your spiritual stuff. When did you realize that this whole being one of the boys is not how we're supposed to live, and this is not how we're going to create a better world?
So I vividly remember I was a director at a large regulator, so a government regulator, and you can imagine regulator a bit like your detention prison center, you know, centers, very masculine, very rigid. They were paid to find fault, so everything was a problem or an issue and needed a risk analysis done. And I guess I'd learned to grow balls by then and play in the masculine, you know, snake pit.
Did you used to be proud of that though? I used to be proud. I used to be proud people say I had balls. Like, yep. Now I'm like, oh my God. If you give them a little tap, they hurt. That's not very empowered.
Yeah, I'm sure the feminine part's actually much more resilient.
There's a Betty White quote about that, but I won't say it.
It was actually Melbourne Cup Day. You can whisper it in my ear later. It was Melbourne Cup Day, and for many years before, in other roles and things I'd done, I'd usually taken a day off Melbourne Cup Day, and it was like the one day of the year that I did something girly, and I'd go out to lunch with girlfriends and have a cup day. And on this particular year, as I was saying, I was a director, and they decided to schedule a board meeting. And I was like, who schedules a board meeting on Melbourne Cup Day? But, you know, got to do what I got to do. And so going into the board meeting, I thought, you know what, I'm still going to wear my hat and I'm going to dress up. So I went to the office that day, you know, and we were at our corporate head office that day in Sydney. I had my hat on, you know, and nice bright coloured dress or something or other. Well, the whole board meeting, they couldn't settle. The hat became the whole focus, and you know, all the gentlemen around the table just wanted to talk about betting and horses and my hat. And it was like it just totally distracted them. And it was the one time I guess I showed up in my feminine a bit. And I ended up having to put the hat under the table on the floor because we just couldn't get into the meeting because it was obviously such a distraction for them. And it was several weeks later, so there'd been some of our board members there, and I hadn't met all of them before, so a couple of older gentlemen I hadn't met that I met at that meeting. A couple of weeks later, I was at a function with ministers at Kapana Macquarie Tower, and one of those board members were there, and I saw him from across the room, so I went over to say hello, and he said, "I remember you, you're the hat lady." And I guess I'd been dubbed that then, and it was all he remembered about me, clearly nothing about the strategy that I'd pitched and presented that day or any of the good work I'd been doing with my team. And he just remembered me as the hat lady. And I think that was one of those moments where I went, wow, so I actually really do have to squash who I am if I'm going to survive in this environment. And you know what? That is me. That's my true me. I wasn't playing dress ups. That's actually who I am, you know, and it just made me realize I'm not respected for that, and I'm not seen for that. And I'm then seen as an object. And do I have to go back to plain grey or black pinstripe suits in order to get my message heard? And it just started me realizing your environment is everything. Yeah. And I was in the wrong environment, and it was a misfit, and I tried to change the environment and the culture around me. And it's why I do so much culture work now, because I realized I could only make change around the small pond that I had around me, but the above was really too hard for me to crack, and they were very established in their culture. Yeah. And so now when I'm working with organizations on their culture, I'm really clear to say, unless the leaders at the very highest level are on board, I can't help you, because all we're going to do is create friction and frustration. If at a lower level we start working on culture, they start growing and expanding. If everyone above is still contained, it's going to be diabolical. We could actually do more damage. So I'm really clear with organizations now that I need to have that buy-in and total alignment from the top. It has to come from there. Otherwise, there's no point, and it's not sustainable. So I think it's when I started to see I'm in the wrong place, the wrong environment. Where can I go now to stretch my wings? And as I said, I was really fortunate to have given myself enough of a buffer financially that I could just quit my job, and I wasn't jumping off a cliff and thinking, how will I feed myself? I was at a point where I was like, I could sell a house, or, you know, I've got enough cash reserves behind me. So I had the freedom to then kind of explore for the next little while, what do I want to be and what does that look like? And I'd been training as a coach, so I was having those skills behind me. But let me tell you, it was a really big wake-up call and learning to operate differently in a different world. And yes, I burnt my incense and had crystals in the background, and my mum and family used to say, you really are a hippie at heart. But that was always kind of hidden. And in my first year of business, after leaving what was a large six-figure salary at the time, I stepped into my own business, and in my first year, I only made $27,000. And that was really challenging, because I started to then question, am I on the right path here? Because the money's not flowing there, and people don't value this in the same way as they valued me when I represented a big company and had bills. So it really did push my identity quite a bit as well, until I started to find my own way.
So what kept you driving towards what you do now? Why didn't you go back? What is it that kept you aligned?
I think essentially, you know, I was saying before, the purpose of life is to kind of fit in, or that's how we often think it is, and that we're programmed for comfort. So once we get the house and the husband or the 2 kids and the Audi car in the driveway and we think we've made it, we keep going for that comfort, and we then get a bit of homeostasis. We want to keep that. But really we've got to outgrow that comfort zone in order to grow. And so I started to realize that most people actually want the ordinary because their list is ordinary. And that's no disrespect to anyone, but I had the same list too. And I started to go, I actually want an extraordinary life. I don't want an ordinary life. And extraordinary for me is freedom of thought, space, slow mornings, breathing, experiencing, growing, stretching, learning, and being around people that lift me and that challenge my vibration and create consciousness. So for me, I started to go, I actually don't want an ordinary life. I want an extraordinary life. And to do that, you have to claim it. Because if you don't claim the extraordinary life, then ordinary will claim you. And so I knew I wanted to stretch to higher levels of energy. And let me be clear, the money didn't come straight away. And it wasn't about that. It was about finding my way. And that's why I say I was really fortunate that I built up enough cushion that my needs were met, that I, was fed and had a roof over my house. But I really had to get uncomfortable. And that meant in my relationships, in my living space, in the things I bought. I do love shoes and books and, I've collected many over the years. And I've probably spent a salary on shoes, and my bookcases are bulging and overflowing. So I realized I was mood altering by buying physical things and stuff like that. And I had to start going within. And I always say I threw away my television. That was the first bastion, and that was great and freeing because television is the greatest income eliminator and eradicator. It really is hypnosis and mind numbing. So throwing away that was one thing, but I had to start looking at how do I invite in the new parts of the extraordinary life I want. So I started to surround myself with other people. I started to seek out people who were operating at a different level. I looked for businesses that were valuing purpose and people and the planet. I followed people like Richard Branson and read all his books and saw his frequency and
went and met him. And so Heidi went and hung out with Richard for a week at Necker Island with our friend Melissa Houston. So it was like, that's an extraordinary life, isn't it?
And again, thanks to Mel, I did get to experience that. And again, more than anything, the experience taught me how important it is to create the right environment for you and what you're seeking. Because everything about that island and about Richard and his family was about love and family. And yet he's a super successful businessman, but he's super clear on what he needs. So he plays tennis every morning. He goes kite surfing and swims. He does some business, then he hangs out with his family in the afternoon. And he's in a beautiful environment. He eats beautiful fresh food. He's really clear on what are my non-negotiables? What do I need? And so that started to show me that it's not just about your income or what level you're at. It's about consciously creating that extraordinary life that you want and believing in yourself enough and valuing yourself enough. And that's what I hadn't done all my life. I'd always served others without looking at how do I fill up my cup as well. And so this year I've actually dubbed my year of being up myself. And I know in Australia a lot of people are compromised by that because they're like, you're what? You're up yourself?
Yeah, tall poppy.
And I really believe, the more we fill up our cup, the more we're able to spill over and be generous to others. And I would hope that my friends and people I spend time with would say I'm generous.
Absolutely.
That if they
so that, generous.
I would be pleased. So I also know if I don't be kind to myself, I can't be that. And then there's resentment that builds up. And, in my relationships and things in the past, there was always resentment and things building up because I'm doing everything. And, I'd become the martyr, but, I'd co-created that.
Absolutely.
Because I hadn't ever stopped you know. And I think that's my biggest lesson was when you're on that treadmill and just running, you just never stop to go, whoa, hang on a minute, what do I really need here?
And we don't set boundaries.
So the year of being up myself is all about listening.
Yeah, we don't set boundaries. We don't say no. We're not lovingly assertive. We get quite passive aggressive and think that that's being assertive, and it's not. I think this is a really good segue into your spiritual health, especially you talking about Richard Branson. So what happens when people talk about spiritual health, especially in the male, dominated masculine environments? Everyone thinks it's woo-woo, and there's all that, oh, this is just some crazy witchy poo chick that's come along and she's nuts, that kind of speech that gets thrown around about people who are focusing on their spiritual health, and they're not understanding that it's not this woo-woo out there crystal tree hugging incense burning stuff. It's about consciousness. It's about being aware of your energy. It's about being aware of you're an energetic being. And people super successful like Richard do pay a lot of attention to their spiritual health. And one of the hugest spiritual thought leaders in the world, Marianne Williamson, was at that week that you had at Necker Island. How was your experience with her?
Mm-hmm. So she was the slap in the face that I needed. And actually, I loved Richard's work and his philosophy and his leadership style. But I say now in retrospect, I went there to meet Marianne, and I would never have guessed that in the beginning. And so I knew of her work, and I had read A Return to Love many years ago, but in my consumption years where I was just like, yep, read that book, next, read that book.
Yeah.
So it had never really kind of landed and settled with me. And so upon meeting her, at first, the very first day we saw her, some other people I was with thought she was a vagrant. Sorry, Marianne. But we saw her on another island before we were catching a plane and a boat to Necker. And she was quite bedraggled. She'd actually been traveling for 24 hours. We learned later. And she's quite thin and lean. And she had flowing cheesecloth on, and her hair was all windswept. And we were like, who is this bag lady? And then she turned up at dinner that night at Necker, and someone said, there's the bag lady. And they said, that's Marianne Williamson. And we were like, oh dear. But I think initially upon meeting her, she was actually what I would say, she was wearing balls and was quite aggressive in some ways. And she was running for politics at the time in America. And so people would just bring up something in discussion. We had lots of group forums and just chats all in, his beautiful temple on the mountain. And she would go, damn it, I disagree. And that's not being patriotic. And this is not true. And she was saying Apple is a conspiracy and they're a controlled environment and they're trying to brainwash us all and all of these things. And I was like, whoa, lady. And I found myself steering clear of her and avoiding her at all costs because I found her really confrontational, and she was pushing my buttons and my edges. So for the first 2 or 3 days, I went nowhere near her and was like, I'll just avoid the crazy lady in the corner. And then I think it was the third day, she actually presented for the morning and ran a 2.5-hour session for us. And every cell in my body stood up on end. And the whole time she spoke, my hairs on the back of my neck and my arms were just standing up. And it was like she was speaking directly to my soul. And she still had that forthrightness and very directness about her, but it was clear she was giving us a message from some other source. And I'd always been a believer in the universe. I wouldn't say a religious person, but a bit of a believer, and I saw the power of energy in people. But she really tapped into something that day. And at the end of her talk, when she was just kind of having Q&A with us and chatting, I said to her, Marianne, how do I show up better for my clients? I'm doing everything I can, but I still see suffering in workplaces and I really want to serve them. And I'm not quite sure what else could I do to support these people, because I just see so many people really struggling. And she paused and looked me right in the eye and said, Heidi, what you have to do is remember that you're a faucet, which in our words would be a tap.
Yeah.
But in the American way, it was, you are a faucet. And she said, so next time you're going to meet a client, I want you to meditate on them in the morning. I want you to say, God or source or universe, allow me to be of service and to show up and deliver exactly what these people need and to hold the space for them. And she said, and then just turn the tap on when you turn up. So she said, no preparation, no reports, no writing big bloody documents, just show up, be clear and centered, have kind of grouped your energy and regrouped. And she said, and then just turn the tap on and allow whatever comes out to come out. And I was like, I couldn't possibly do that. I always write big reports and prepare documents and have notes ready. But I kind of heard her. And then that same day, I sat and had lunch with her and deliberately sought her out and spent some time and got to understand her political views a bit more and where she was coming from, but also just heard a bit more of her story and her faith and belief. And when I came home, the very first week after NECA, I went, every client, I'm just going to do this, meditate in the morning and show up and be present. And oh my God, the transformations and things that started to happen just in that first week with clients who were having major ahas and shifts and conscious awareness that they'd never had before. And I kept kind of turning around going, I'm not doing anything. I'm just asking a question. I'm just being present. I'm just holding the space. And it really shifted something in me to go, there's a different way to work. And, you know, we all have access to showing up and being present like that. So, yeah, I am gifted by meeting the crazy lady named Marianne Williamson, who, you know, I now adore.
So what are you doing now with your spiritual health? How are you exercising? What do I call it? Exercising the tools and practices that we have for spiritual health. What are you doing?
Right. So I cleanse regularly, just like I brush my teeth. I'm conscious of cleansing my energy and, you know, getting rid of the stuff that I don't want to keep, especially when I've been to see clients. I am still an A-type personality. I can very quickly take on board other people's energy and then get into my freneticness because I'm feeding off that. So I'm much clearer at cleansing myself after each client, after each meeting, and being present and grounded. But probably the biggest thing I've instigated of recent has been, I've meditated for quite a while, but not with such conscious focus. So I'm studying yoga teacher training at the moment, and not because I see myself as in the future being a gifted yoga teacher, but I'm purely doing the course, which is a year-long course, for my own spiritual growth. And because I see there's so much in the ancient wisdom of yoga, and there's a lot in the philosophy and history of it, but so much in the breath work and mantras, and starting to learn to work with, you know, the many energetic fields that we have within our body and beyond. And so that's really deepened my daily practice. So this being the year of my being up myself, I'm practicing slow mornings. And that means I don't take clients or meetings on before 10 a.m. because, and it doesn't mean I sleep in till 10. I still get up at around 6 in the morning, but I know that I need to fill up my cup first before I can serve. And for me, that's a daily thing. So I take time to walk my dogs, do my own exercise. I do my half-hour daily personal practice of yoga, and I've had a very experienced yogi help me develop my own personal daily practice. And that includes breath work, a mantra that I chant, as well as yoga asanas, and then I meditate. And then I eat breakfast before I go out into the world. So for me, that's been incredibly important in setting me up every single day. And some people might go, wow, you know, you spend a couple of hours every day doing all that. But you know what? Everything works better when I've established that for myself. And I'm also a member of a global spiritual circle. And I've been a member of that for about 1.5 years now. And that has members, as I said, from all around the world. And to hear other people's perspective and to just be in a position where our whole goal is to co-create and to raise our frequency or vibration together has been extremely valuable. And that's nothing to do with anyone's career or whether they've been corporate or anything like that. It's totally to do with their spiritual path and the focus that they want to have in their own well-being. So yeah, I'm doing quite a bit more than I did years ago in my corporate world. And I am still a bit of an addictive type, so I could easily get addicted to jumping into it as well. So I'm really clear that I have to stay grounded as well as go up, because otherwise I'd probably start moving into my crown chakra and never touch the ground again. So I'm really clear that in order to help the clients that I work with who still very much work in a three-dimensional world, I have to be able to not just tap into that, but I have to be able to ground it and make it real and practical. And I work with men and women, but lots of men.
Yeah.
And if I got too up in that space, they'd just be like, what the hell?
Exactly.
I can introduce some of those concepts, but they need to be in practical, daily, grounded terms. So yeah, for me, it's this cleansing, centering myself, getting my own vessel open and ready, protecting and buffering myself, and then, you know, being really in that grounded space so that I can show up and be of service. Yeah.
And it's a beautiful way to
answer.
No, it's a beautiful way to introduce to men how to nurture their divine feminine, because they don't get a lot of it. And it's really important for parents now to understand that they need to put practices in place that their sons and daughters are nurturing the nurturing and creative part of themselves. Their divine feminine. It can't just all be about protector, provider, because then that's when competition comes in, and that's when scarcity comes in, and that's when wars happen, and that's when violent crimes happen, and it's all around people freaking out in fear-based energies around that protector to provider stuff. Whereas you bring in nurturing and creativity, you're just naturally bringing in love, and we all need to understand that love is the most important thing. So just before we finish up, tell people what's happening with your joy box, because, you know, so many people are bombarded online, like all the white noise of I earn 7 figures and you could earn 7 figures too, and it's all about wealth and it's all about money and it's all about accumulation, and everyone's striving for the big 7-figure salary, not understanding that it's not so much the money. You want to bring back freedom. It's not how much money you have, it's the freedom and the contentment and the fulfillment that you have in your life, not the numbers in the account or the house that you're surrounded in, or whether or not you've got such and such car. So what are you doing now? You self-made millionaires. Shock everybody about how you're about to live.
Oh, I don't think it's that shocking. And actually, I do call
myself. I think it's excellent.
Minimalist. I still like nice things. Like I'm looking at your backdrop there with all the gold and everything, and I'm like, oh, how fabulous. So I still like girly, bright, shiny things. But I realized after a while that, you know, the stuff wasn't what gave me joy, and that, you know, if you strive your whole life to accumulate stuff, you end up with stuff all. Mm-hmm. And I also saw my parents, as they're becoming elderly, their social circle shrinking and their experience, therefore, of life becoming less, because they were becoming more housebound and not doing stuff and not having connection with the world as much. And I realized that I might end up that way if I didn't consciously do something different. And you know, I was starting to go, I'm cluttered and I've got stuff all around me, and it's just actually making me tense. Mm-hmm. So, and on top of that, in the last 2 years, probably I've seen my tenants in greater financial distress than ever. So I've had a lot of tenants having to pay off their rent and catch up and be late and all of that. As economically, I think the incomes that they get haven't increased, but everything else has. Yeah. And so I started to go, what are we doing? Like, why are we just consuming pointlessly? And when you hear things like Australia actually is the worst for landfill from
I
clothing
know.
that's been thrown away.
I
And I looked
know.
in my wardrobe and went, ooh, what the hell? And so I had a stylist, Deanne, come in and help me choose clothes that suited my colour and style. And I removed everything else. So I'm sad to say 660 items of clothes got donated.
Whoa, wow.
Experience.
You know what? I'm going, whoa, wow. But if I think about all the decluttering that I've done this year, it wasn't all at once. It's a process of letting go of stuff that you don't need, isn't it? It's such a process.
Yeah, and a lifetime of stuff.
Mm.
And you know, and I started to go, I want to be free. And to do that, I've got to let go of some of the burden of this stuff. And then I started to go, on the weekends, I've got to mow the lawn and clean the gutters out and polish the windows and weed the lawn. And I was like, I'm spending all my time maintaining my stuff. And it doesn't give me joy. I'd rather go to a yoga retreat or have a walk on the beach with my girlfriends and have a coffee and play time with my dogs. And so I went, well, what would allow me that? And what can stop me out of this cycle that I'm in? And so I really started looking at the minimalist path. And I've been on that path for probably about a year now, and have gradually let go of so much stuff. And it started with the wardrobe, and then I did things like my kitchen. I boxed everything up and put it all in the laundry. And then as I needed a ladle or a whisk, I'd go and get it out. And if I needed it, I'd keep it. Anything that I didn't touch in the 3 months, some of my blenders and egg beaters and crap, I let go of and I donated them. And I just started to feel better and lighter and started to go. And it's so easy to open your cupboards and go, I've got a choice of 2 plates. That's it. And it's not this whole, you know, open the cupboard and all the Tupperware falls out. I have one little box of Tupperware and it all has to fit in that. And if it spills over, it goes. So I just started to realize I could actually live with a lot less and I didn't need it as much. And so, and also that there just wasn't enough low income housing. So I might advertise one of my properties, say a 1-bedroom apartment, and I would get 80 applicants, and they would be families with 3 children. And I'd say to them, this is a 1-bedroom apartment. You all can't possibly live in that. And they'd say, please, we're desperate. We're living on a friend's lounge room. And I started to go, there's just not anything at that lower level of affordable accommodation. And there's lots of mum and dads out there that I'm sure if they've got their own mortgage are struggling to pay that off and would love a bit of extra income. And they've got these big 1/4 acre blocks sitting there. And so I started to look at the tiny house movement. And I already have a couple of blocks with a house and a granny flat, and that works great. And I've got single people in those granny flats that have been there since day dot, and they love it. And I went, so let's look at tiny houses, because you actually don't need council approval in the same way because they're on wheels and they're mobile. And as I started to look at them, I thought to myself, these are a real solution for housing affordability. And we've got such a crisis of that here in Australia. This could be the start. You know, a uni student or someone might be able to get into the market this way. A mum and dad might be able to put one on their block, pay off their own mortgage quicker, and give a student or a low income person good, decent housing. And so I started to look at it more and more and got really excited by it. And then I thought to myself, well, how livable are they? And they look cute, but really, you know, would you actually live in it? And so I kind of went, well, I should try it, because if I couldn't live in it, how could I expect someone else to suck it up and live in it? And so for the past kind of 2 months or 2 and a bit months, I've been working with the most beautiful builders, Clay Build, who are here in Australia, and have been designing and now building my own tiny house. And I've pretty well packed up everything and still have to do my shoes.
Good luck with that.
That will come.
Can't they build a special storage box on top?
We did talk about underfloor storage just for my shoes, but you know, I think I need to just take 3 or 4 pair with me and that's it. But essentially I am going to live a nomadic life coming soon, and we'll be living in my tiny house and having my 1 plate, 1 cup, 1 spoon, and learning to live minimally. It's all off grid, so it has a compost toilet, it has solar energy, so it's really got an extremely low footprint, carbon footprint, so it's good for the planet. And it also means I'm going to travel, so meet more people, expand my circle, and hopefully not end up with the shrinking circle like I've seen with my parents, and bless them, no issue on their part. But I just went, I think that's what's next for me. And if I can live in it and find it of value, I'll be investing in looking for land, and also building more of them and looking at them as a way for people to invest in and to provide more of that housing affordability where people need it. So yeah, I know people say they're super excited, but I can't tell you how bubbly that gets when I think about living minimally and just not being tied down to stuff and having the freedom to explore and go on a journey that I know is going to be an inward one, because it will be very different to the existence I have now. But yeah, so I'm really looking forward to what's next, and who knows where that will take me.
That's so exciting. We have to finish up. Somebody's here to visit you. I'm going to finish up and then we'll talk about whoever it is that's come in here to visit you. I have a visitor for you here. I know, it's a bit odd. I know, we'll have to talk about it after I don't know who it is. We'll finish up. So where can people find you?
So business-wise, uqpower.com.au. Mm-hmm. If you're on LinkedIn, Heidi Alexandra Joy. I'm on Facebook as well for business. But if you're interested in the Joy Box and the tiny house, and if you're like me, I've got an obsession with looking at people's designs and nifty, crafty ways of building storage into small areas, then I have an Instagram account and a Facebook page called the Joy Box. So you can follow my build there. We're just at the point of painting. The kitchen's just gone in.
It's so exciting.
We've got to tile the bathroom and do the floor next. So you can hop on and watch that develop and evolve as well.
I can't wait to see it finished. For those of you at home, like Heidi's been a client of mine and the builder has been a client of mine, and it all came up in readings and sessions for them. So for me to get to see it actually come to fruition is so exciting for me, because I'm like, oh, I had a vision and now look, you're doing it. I love it. It's so cool.
And I know in particular with the builder, I explored lots of other builders because the builder wasn't that keen in the beginning and said, oh, I don't think so, because it wasn't what they traditionally did.
Yeah.
And I looked at all these other builders and then just kept coming back to them. And then once you did the reading, I was like, that's it, it's them. And so I actually waited a year for clay build to go radio. Okay. So I had to wait for them to come around. So
I'm so excited in that as well. I'm so excited for them, because this is a big thing for them. This is what they become really well known for. So just to see it in the beginning, because I already know where it's going, I'm so excited for them. I'm so excited for you, because I already see the land and all of that that's happening. It's so cool. It's so cool. I love it. All right, well, thank you. We're going to stop this call, and a visitor's come here for Heidi. So for those of you who don't know, I'm a medium, and a lady's turned up. So we'll have to finish this and I can talk to Heidi about it. Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Great. Thank you. And thanks for all you're doing with the Golden Goddesses. It's awesome.
You're welcome. See ya.
Bye.